much better, it's 37. Well, the definition of young scientist or young investigator may be in the eyes of the beholder. My first research grant was at 25, not because I was smart, but because there was an opportunity. So there is an issue about the seed corn for the future, and I hope we can do some discussion and comparison among the different systems. Okay, Dr. Zurbuchen, you're on.
So I read books by these people that talked ahead of me, and so I decided to not give the same kind of presentation they do, but rather focus down on kind of a much smaller part. And really it is the topic that you actually just mentioned, which is the young faculty topic. And I was really inspired by what I'm going to say by an article that Gottfried Schatz, former president of the Swiss Council of Science and Technology, wrote. He wrote an article that started with a statement that says, Switzerland could be first place in science. He says Switzerland is excellent in terms of its educational system, top-notch infrastructure, political stability, good image abroad, considerable financial resources, and I really can attest to that. I graduated from the University of Bern in Switzerland, and you know, if you look at any ranking, Bern is typically at the second half of Swiss universities, often even farther back in the second half. And there are some aspects just about Bern that are truly remarkable. The first science experiment deployed by US astronauts in space on the moon was built in Bern. In fact, the sensor was deployed before the US flag on the moon, which talks to the tremendous scientific integrity of the US space program at that point. It makes every Swiss proud, needless to say. I hold 2 passports, so I'm pretty okay with one or the other way. The same department, in fact, down the hallway pioneered ice core measurements and used for climate change, and they were paramount in the understanding of climate history. In fact, there are certain events in climate history that carry names of Swiss professors. The Dalsgaard-Oeschger events. Oeschger was my professor in atmospheric science, and many of the facilities there are just tremendous. In fact, for space science, the one that I know better, the standards of the test facilities for mass spectrometers or space-based plasma sensors are in Switzerland are far beyond anything we have in this country. I don't know a single test facility that is as good as the one in Bern. And so the collaborations with these facilities have been amazing. Gottfried Schatz then moves on and basically says, well, the key issue that prevents some of the Swiss universities to become really #1 in these areas, he says, is because of the fact that Switzerland is plagued by being too egalitarian. Everybody has the same chance, it's the same, you know, and that is really praiseworthy. I have to say, I got a chance in Switzerland. I would never make it through a US school. My parents ran out of food often before the end of the month. My father was a pastor with a very irregular income, with very off-whack religious views that probably in the US would have put me in a religious school and sunk my career from there. And basically what happened in Switzerland, that really praiseworthy and tremendous public school system that lifted me out of that town, made me one of the first students in that village, and put me in school, is one of the things that later in universities is a detriment, in fact. My experience at the University of Bern, I was a student representative there, and at the University of Michigan, actually demonstrate that is the biggest difference between how faculty are getting funding at Bern compared to Michigan. Many of the faculty are equally good, absolutely no change. I mean, they could move back and forth, no problem. But they're really limited because of the fact that salaries are fixed, and much of the money, in many cases 80% of the money, is allocated somehow. So after working at the University of Michigan for 2 years, I made more money than 2 of the professors in my department. The salary increases I learned were based on performance, and it doesn't work perfectly. But and I wish the increments were bigger, especially now sometimes. But it makes a big difference over time. annual evaluations addressed how I'm dealing with students. If the students like that, that helps me in my salary overall. And basically it helped that I ran, or I'm running now, close to $1.5 million a year of a research group. That's not huge compared to many of the research groups in my university. But when people started recruiting me back to Switzerland and basically say, why don't you come? In many places, I just couldn't see the upside of going back, because to a certain extent, that was the budget, the free budget that I had, that was the budget that, of the entire department in some of the places that people offered me jobs. So one of the most important pieces, and I think that Switzerland understands that, and so do many European countries, is that excellence, research excellence, is not because of the equal quality of everybody. It's because of the tremendous excellence of a few that lead. And I think, in my opinion, and I think many of the systems have changed since I left in '96. But I think that has been one of the most important lessons that I learned. One of the questions that we always get is, does that hurt that entrepreneurial spirit of professors doing groups, in many cases starting companies even on the side and so forth? Does that hurt the students? Well, I ran a PhD program there at the University of Michigan and also a master's program, so I did a lot of work with data of evaluations of the research impact of individual professors as well as their teaching evaluations. That's a very unbiased way, by the way. I cannot affect my teaching evaluations. In fact, they send me out of the room when they fill in the questionnaires. I cannot return those questionnaires, so I don't know how to meddle with that. Well, in all cases that I looked at, there was an exact correlation with only a few outliers in my department. Out of 25 professors, there was a fact correlation. The best researchers were also the best teachers, and only 2 outliers. One of them is a really fantastic researcher who can't teach her way out of a hole. And the other exception is a person that started building companies instead of research, frankly. The reason the metric is off there is because of the metric, not because of the guy. The guy is fantastic.